Ernest, imagine waking up one morning and losing your savings, your home, your children, and your physical health, all before the week is out. If everything that made your life secure disappeared, would you still trust God? Thousands of years ago, in the land of Uz, a man named Job faced exactly that test. He owned thousands of sheep, camels, and oxen, and had 10 children. In the ancient Near East, this specific combination of massive wealth and a large family was universally accepted as undeniable proof of God's favor. Job took his spiritual life seriously. After family feasts, he would systematically offer sacrifices on behalf of his children, just in case any of them had secretly sinned in their hearts. His devotion was meticulous. But while Job is tending to his earthly life, the story abruptly cuts away to a divine counsel in heaven. From this point on, you, the reader, know a secret that the characters on earth do not. Among the heavenly beings stands a figure called Satan, which translates to the accuser. He proposes a wager. He argues that Job's devotion is strictly transactional, that Job only worships God to maintain his wealth, health, and divine protection. Take those away, the accuser says, and Job will curse God to his face. God accepts the challenge. He grants permission for Job to be tested, laying down one strict condition. Job's wife cannot be taken. The trap is set. What follows is a terrifying vacuum. Job is about to endure maximum suffering without any warning, explanation, or context. His ability to maintain his faith will be tested entirely against the total silence of heaven. The destruction arrives in hours. Raiders sweep in and steal Job's oxen and donkeys. A massive fire consumes his entire flock of sheep. Enemies ride off with his camels. His earthly empire is dismantled in a single afternoon. Then comes the devastating blow. A powerful wind strikes the house where Job's 10 children are gathered, collapsing the structure and killing everyone inside. Job's immediate response becomes one of history's most famous declarations. He tears his robes, shaves his head, and says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away." He chooses to bless God, refusing to curse him. Because Job maintains his integrity, the accuser returns to the divine counsel. He argues that anyone will endure external losses to save their own skin. So God permits the test to escalate directly to Job's physical body. Painful sores break out from the soles of Job's feet to the top of his head. The agony is so unbearable, he sits in a pile of ashes, scraping his ruined skin with pieces of broken pottery. Watching this, even his wife loses hope, telling him to curse God and die. Job refuses. He has survived the total collapse of his transactional blessings. But as the physical shock wears off, the true trial begins. The test of physical endurance becomes a brutal psychological search for answers. 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, travel to comfort him. Seeing him so disfigured, they weep, tear their clothes, and sit with him in absolute silence for 7 days and 7 nights. Finally, Job breaks the silence. He doesn't curse God, but curses the day he was born. His words pour out in a state of utter emotional exhaustion, begging to know why he was allowed to live only to experience such pain.
This flowchart outlines retribution theology, a strict ancient equation. Good deeds flow directly to blessing, and sin flows directly to suffering. Job's friends work this logic backward. Since Job is experiencing extreme suffering, they deduce he must be hiding a massive secret sin. Job fiercely rejects their accusations. He acknowledges he isn't perfect, but he knows he hasn't committed crimes to warrant this disaster. He pushes back with agonizing questions. Why do innocent people suffer while the wicked often prosper? A younger man named Elihu eventually breaks in, challenging both Job and his friends. He argues that suffering isn't always a legal sentence for a crime. Sometimes it's a way for God to humble a person or speak through the pain. While this moves the conversation from punishment towards a sense of purpose, he is still guessing. He remains as blind to the heavenly wager as the others. The tragedy here is the dramatic irony. 4 men sit in the ashes. arguing intensely to solve a cosmic puzzle using a broken earthly formula. None of them have any idea that a heavenly wager set this all in motion. Then the debate ends abruptly. God speaks to Job directly, not with a quiet whisper of comfort, but out of a terrifying whirlwind. The response completely subverts human expectations. God does not answer a single one of Job's why questions. He doesn't mention the accuser, or the wager, or the divine counsel. Instead, God unleashes a barrage of his own questions. He asks where Job was when the earth's foundations were laid. Can he command the morning? Can he bind the stars or control the seas? God then describes two mysterious beasts, Behemoth and Leviathan. These creatures stand as symbols of immense, uncontrollable power and the sheer complexity of creation that exists far beyond human management. If Job cannot explain how a lion finds its prey or why the stars keep their place, he cannot expect to audit the justice of the Creator. Human logic, which demands a simple reason for every tragedy, is dwarfed by a wisdom that sustains everything from the deep oceans to the constellations. Humble tone. Facing the sheer scale of the cosmos, Job's posture changes completely. He responds with humility, repenting in dust and ashes. He recognizes his own hubris in thinking he could fully comprehend the mechanics of the universe. God then turns to Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. He definitively rebukes them, destroying the strict retribution theology formula they clung to. Their assumption that suffering is always a direct punishment for personal sin was entirely wrong. In the aftermath, God restores Job's fortunes, granting him twice as much wealth and a new family. In a highly radical move for ancient culture, Job gives his new daughters an inheritance right alongside their brothers, a distinct act of grace. When this story began, Job trusted God because he knew about him and obeyed the rules. By the end, Job trusts God completely because he survived the silence and had a personal, direct encounter with him. The book of Job leaves us with a challenging reality. We are asked to trust God's presence, even when we are denied his explanations. If you were faced with the absolute silence of heaven, could your faith survive? Let me know in the comments and tell me which story from the Bible we should explore next.